टाइम से हैं भाइयों, 10:36 हो चुके हैं वैसे, पर मैं आने कर ना, मैंने दबा दिया था ना 10:35 पे। गाइस आई थिंक एवरीथिंग्स फाइन, लेट मी जस्ट वंस चेक। आई थिंक एवरीथिंग इज़ फाइन। मेरे को एक बार फिर भी बता देना अगर ऑडियो में कुछ ऊपर नीचे होता है, अगर मेरी माइक की आवाज़ ज़रा ऊपर नीचे होती है या म्यूज़िक की आवाज़ ज़रा ऊपर नीचे होती है तो प्लीज़ डू लेट मी नो। बट या वी आर बैक विद बुक रीडिंग द साइलेंट पेशेंट। हमने लास्ट वीक ये बुक पढ़नी शुरू करी थी और प्लान यही था कि लास्ट वीक एक बुक पढ़ डालेंगे पूरी, बट यू नो लाइफ मैन, लाइफ नहीं कर पाए। बट कोई बात नहीं, इस हफ्ते हम ये बुक कर देंगे ख़त्म भाई, ये बुक पढ़ डालेंगे भाई इस हफ्ते। तो मैं बता रहा हूँ तुम्हें, रोज़ आऊँगा रोज़, ठीक है, पक्का से। ज़िंदगी नहीं तो कुछ है नहीं यार, ज़िंदगी में क्या है, ज़िंदगी में अपने जैसे लोग ढूंढो भाई, उनके साथ देखो बैठो, सब फाइन है भाई, वेरी गुड, लेट्स गो। तो मेरे को ये नहीं समझ आ रहा, म्यूज़िक थोड़ा सा लो कर दो बस, है ना, मेरे को लग रहा था। कर देता हूँ भाई जी, जैसा आपको, थोड़ा लो कर दिया म्यूज़िक। म्यूज़िक से क्या होता है, एक वाइब बनी रहती है, समझ रहे हो आप। वेलकम टू बुक रीडिंग लाइव स्ट्रीम। द बुक इज साइलेंट पेशेंट। वी स्टार्टेड रीडिंग दिस लास्ट वीक। ऑल्सो हमने क्या किया है, हमने इस बार आज कैप्शंस भी मैंने ऑन कर दिए हैं। सो while I talk in English, are the captions available? Please check and let me know. एक बार मैं चेक करके देखूं भाइयों, मैं बड़ा डिस्ट्रैक्ट हो जाता हूँ। मैं सोचता हूँ ऐसा कि अब तो मैं भाई आऊँगा और डायरेक्टली बुक पढ़नी शुरू कर दूंगा, कोई टाइम वेस्ट नहीं करूँगा। बट कैप्शन नॉट अवेलेबल आ रहा है। कोई बात नहीं भाई, नेक्स्ट टाइम मे बी आफ्टर द स्ट्रीम द कैप्शंस आर अवेलेबल। तो क्योंकि हम अंग्रेज़ी किताब पढ़ रहे थे, मुझे लगा भाई कैप्शंस वैप्शंस होंगे तो सही रहेगा। बट वाई डज शी नॉट स्पीक। तो अच्छा, हमने लास्ट टाइम ये किताब पढ़नी शुरू तो करी थी, बट एक्चुअली मेरे को याद नहीं हमने कहाँ तक पढ़ी थी, और मेरे को लगता है बहुत ज़्यादा लोग थे भी नहीं। तो क्या मुझे दोबारा पढ़नी चाहिए या फिर क्या करना चाहिए? क्या मैं वहीं से कंटिन्यू करूँ, एक रिकैप खुद ऐसे ही थोड़ा सा देख लूँ पर ऊपर से, या फिर यहाँ से बुक रीडिंग वाली चीज़ प्रॉपर से शुरू करूँ? क्या करना चाहिए बताओ गाइस, बताओ। चल यार आयुष भाई, ना आपको पता ना मुझे पता है, भगवान जाने किसको पता है भाई। मे गॉड बी विद द राइट पर्सन, मे द रॉन्ग पर्सन बी पनिश्ड, एंड या ब्रो, कभी कभी ना भाई, मैंने ऑनेस्टली सोचा था मैं आऊँगा और ये सब चीज़ों के बारे में बात नहीं करूँगा कि क्या है यार, मेरे को नहीं बात करनी। आई वॉज लिटिल अफेक्टेड बाय ऑल ऑफ दिस, बट मैं बस ये कहना चाहूँगा भाई आपको, कि दुनिया भाई बड़ी अजीब है यार। बड़ा इफेक्टेड सा था मैं इन सब चीज़ों से, मेरा मन नहीं था इन सब चीज़ों के बारे में बात करने का। बट यार हाँ, मतलब इट इज़ लाइफ, इट इज़ वियर्ड, ऑल यू कैन डू इज़ व्हेन यू सी सच थिंग्स यू कैन जस्ट साय। मतलब मेरे को तो यही होता है कि डैम ब्रो, आई डोंट नो व्हाट कैन आई डू अबाउट दिस, बट लाइक भगवान का नाम लो, अपनी ज़िंदगी में आगे बढ़ो। ऐसी बहुत सारी चीज़ें चलती रहती है, मैं ये नहीं कहूँगा अनदेखा करो या कुछ भी, बट लाइक आई एम द काइंड ऑफ पर्सन who likes to mind their own business most of the times, and yeah bro, समझ गए आयुष भाई? मेरे को ये तो बताओ कि मैं कहाँ से शुरू करूँ पढ़ना। ओके 4th चैप्टर तो हमने नहीं पढ़ रखा. ओके हमने 3rd भी नहीं पढ़ा, हमने 2 ही चैप्टर पढ़ रखे हैं. हमने 10 पेज पढ़ रखे हैं अपेरेंटली. तो ये 10 पेज तो दोबारा ही पढ़े जा सकते हैं ना. ओके लेट्स गो. लेट्स read these 10 pages again. Starting now, I'll probably start reading the book. And आयुष भाई, I know कि थोड़ा क्यूरियोसिटी होती है, बट आप मतलब इस चैनल पे आते हुए यू नो मी, आई थिंक यू नो मी एज अ पर्सन इतना तो कि मैं ज़्यादा इन जनरल भी कोई भी इस तरीके की चीज़ें ऑनलाइन हो रही होती है, मैं कम ही बात करता हूँ ऐसी चीज़ों के बारे में, ऑनलाइन स्पेशली. फिर वही अंग्रेज़ी किताब जो बात है. तो यहाँ से भाई आई वुड जेन्युइनली रिक्वेस्ट जितने भी अभी लोग बैठे हैं कि हम वी सिट हेयर, रीड दिस बुक, हैव अ गुड टाइम. एंड मैं यहाँ पे आता हूँ ताकि मैं वो सब चीज़ों से भाग के आऊँ जो भी मतलब ज़िंदगी में चल रही हैं कि भाई आपने गाना क्यों नहीं भेजा, भाई ये क्या करना है, उसका क्या करना है, इसका क्या करना है. तो यस, अब बैठ जाते हैं हम किताब पढ़ने. रीड कर लो 2nd चैप्टर, है ना. मैं वही सोच रहा हूँ सारा दोबारा पढ़ लेते हैं. थैंक यू सो मच आयुष भाई फॉर अंडरस्टैंडिंग. एंड अब हम किताब पढ़ेंगे. वेलकम एवरीवन टू अनदर लाइव स्ट्रीम ऑफ द साइलेंट पेशेंट. इट्स एन इंग्लिश बुक. हमने पिछली बार पढ़ी थी एक हिंदी किताब, आज हम शुरू करेंगे ये वाली इंग्लिश किताब. हमने पिछली में थोड़ी सी पढ़ी थी, लेकिन आज हम पढ़ेंगे दोबारा से और शुरू से. ठीक है, आ जाओ आ जाओ आ जाओ आ जाओ. 800 जे के भाई कहानी सुनते सुनते ही जिम करा. क्या हाल जे के भाई? लेट्स गो, कहानी सुनाओ. लेट्स गो लेट्स गो लेट्स गो. वेलकम यू ऑल, वेलकम वेलकम. चलो चले. The book is by Alex Michaelides. Alex Michaelides. Huh, I think that is the name. But why does she not speak? Prologue. Alicia Berenson's diary, 14 July. I don't know why I'm writing this. That's not true. Maybe I do know and I just don't want to admit it to myself. I don't even know what to call it. This thing I'm writing, it feels a little pretentious to call it a diary. It's not like I have anything to say. Annie Frank kept a diary, or Samuel Pepys, not someone like me. Calling it a journal sounds too academic. As if I should write it every day. And I don't want to. If it becomes a chore, I'll never keep it up. Maybe I'll call it nothing. An unnamed something that occasionally I write in. I like that better. Once you name something, it stops you from seeing all of it or why it matters. You focus on the word, which is just the tiniest part, really the tip of an iceberg. I've never been that comfortable with words. I always think in pictures, express myself with images, so I'd never have started writing this if it weren't for Gabriel. I've been feeling depressed lately about a few things. I thought I was doing a good job of hiding it, but he noticed. Of course he did. He notices everything. He asked how the painting was going. I said it wasn't. He got me a glass of wine and I sat at the kitchen table while he cooked. I liked watching Gabriel move around the kitchen. He's a graceful cook, elegant, balletic, organized. Unlike me, I just make a mess. Talk to me, he said. There's nothing to say. I just get so stuck in my head. Sometimes I feel like I'm wading through mud. Why don't you try writing things down? Keeping some kind of record, that might help. Yes, I suppose so. I'll try it. Don't just say it, darling. Do it. I will. He kept nagging me, but I did nothing about it. And then a few days later, he presented me with this little book to write in. It has a black leather cover and thick white blank pages. I ran my hands across the first page, feeling its smoothness, then sharpened my pencil and began. And he was right, of course. I feel better already. Writing this down is providing a kind of release, an outlet, a space to express myself. A bit like therapy, I suppose. Gabriel didn't say it, but I could tell he's concerned about me. And if I'm going to be honest, and I may as well be, the real reason I agreed to keep this diary was to reassure him, prove that I'm okay. I can't bear the thought of him worrying about me. I don't ever want to cause him any distress or make him unhappy or cause him pain. I love Gabriel so much. He is without a doubt the love of my life. I love him so totally, completely, sometimes it threatens to overwhelm me. Sometimes I think, no, I won't write about that. This is going to be a joyful record of ideas and images that inspire me artistically, things that make a creative impact on me. I'm only going to write positive, happy, normal thoughts, no crazy thoughts allowed. Part 1. He that has eyes to see and ears to hear may convince himself that no mortal can keep a secret. If his lips are silent, he chatters with his fingertips. Betrayal oozes out of him at every pore. Sigmund Freud, Introductory Lectures at Psychoanalysis. It was a quote from Sigmund Freud from the book Introductory Lectures on Psychoanalysis, which says that he that has eyes to see and ears to hear may convince himself that no mortal can keep a secret. If his lips are silent, he chatters with his fingertips. Betrayal oozes out of him at every pore. Chapter 1. वेलकम जो भी अब ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं स्ट्रीम को, आप बहुत ज़्यादा लेट नहीं हो. हमने सिर्फ प्रोलॉग पढ़ा है. चैप्टर 1 स्टार्ट्स फ्रॉम हेयर. The story is about Alicia Berenson. Alicia Berenson was 33 years old when she killed her husband. एकदम ऐसे खुलती है किताब. It just opens up with such a strong word. Alicia Berenson was 33 years old when she killed her husband. They had been married for 7 years. They were both artists. Alicia was a painter and Gabriel was a well-known fashion photographer. He had a distinctive style, shooting semi-starved, semi-naked women at strange, unflattering angles. Since his death, the price of his photographs has increased astronomically. I find his stuff rather slick and shallow, to be honest. It has none of that visceral quality of Alicia's best work. Of course, I don't know enough about art to say whether Alicia Berenson will stand the test of time as a painter, but her talent will always be overshadowed by her notoriety, so it's hard to be objective. And you might well accuse me of being biased. All I can offer is my opinion. For what it's worth, and to me, Alicia was kind of a genius. Apart from her technical skills, her paintings have an uncanny ability to grab your attention, by the throat almost, and hold it in a vice-like grip. Gabriel Berenson was murdered 6 years ago. He was 44 years old. He was killed on the 25th of August. It was an unusually hot summer. You may remember, with some of the highest temperatures ever recorded. The day he died was the hottest of the year. On the last day of his life, Gabriel rose early. A car collected him at 5:15 a.m. from the house he shared with Alicia in northwest London, on the edge of the Hampstead Heath, and he was driven to a shoot in Shoreditch. He spent the day photographing models on a rooftop for Vogue. Not much is known about Alicia's movements. She had an upcoming exhibition and was behind with her work. It's likely she spent the day painting in the summer house at the end of the garden, which she had recently converted into a studio. In the end, Gabriel's shoot ran late and he wasn't driven home until 11 p.m. Half an hour later, their neighbor Barbie Hellman heard several gunshots. Barbie phoned the police, and the car was dispatched from the station on Haverstock Hill at 11:35 p.m. मतलब 5 मिनट में आ गई क्या? क्योंकि 11 बजे वो घर लौटा He came home at 11 and आधे घंटे बाद हाफ एन आवर लेटर देयर नेबर हर्ड गन शॉट्स. 11:30 बजे उसे गन शॉट सुनाई दिए एंड शी फोन द पुलिस एंड द कार अराइव्ड एट 11:35. नहीं, and a car was dispatched from the station on Haverhill at 11:35. Okay, after 5 minutes. Okay, it arrived at the Berenson house in just under 3 minutes. Oh my God, उससे भी जल्दी. Wow. The front door was open. The house was in pitch black darkness. None of the light switches worked. The officers made their way along the hallway and into the living room. They shone torches around the room, illuminating it in intermittent beams of light. Alicia was discovered standing by the fireplace. Her white dress glowed ghost-like in the torchlight. Alicia seemed oblivious to the presence of the police. She was immobilized, frozen, a statue carved from ice with a strange, frightened look on her face, as if confronting some unseen terror. A gun was on the floor. Next to it, in the shadows, Gabriel was seated, motionless, bound to a chair with wire wrapped around his ankles and wrists. At first, the officers thought that he was alive. His head was lolling slightly to one side as if he were unconscious. Then a beam of light revealed Gabriel had been shot several times in the face. His handsome features were gone forever, leaving a charred, blackened, bloody mess. The wall behind him was sprayed with fragments of skull, brains, hair, and blood. Blood was everywhere, splashed on the walls, running in dark rivulets along the floor, along the grains of the wooden floorboards. The officers assumed it was Gabriel's blood, but there was too much of it, and then something glinted in the torchlight. A knife was on the floor by Alicia's feet. Another beam of light revealed the blood splattered on Alicia's white dress. An officer grabbed her by the arms and held them up to the light. There were deep cuts across the veins in her wrist, fresh cuts, bleeding hard. Oh, तो भाई इतना खून था कि उन्हें लगा कि भाई मतलब गैब्रियल का ही होगा, पर वो कुछ ज़्यादा ही खून था. और जब उन्होंने देखा तो एक चाकू भी पड़ा हुआ था जिससे भाई अलीशिया ने अपने हाथ काट रखे थे. डैम. Alicia fought off the attempts to save her life. It took 3 officers to restrain her. Oh, she didn't want to be saved. She wanted to die. It was a suicide attempt, probably. She was taken to the Royal Free Hospital, only a few minutes away. She collapsed and lost consciousness on the way there. She had lost a lot of blood, but she survived. The following day, she lay in bed in a private room at the hospital. The police questioned her in the presence of her solicitor. Alicia remained silent throughout the interview. Her lips were pale, bloodless. They fluttered occasionally but formed no words, made no sound. She answered no questions. She would not speak. Nor did she speak when charged with Gabriel's murder. She remained silent when she was placed under arrest, refusing to deny her guilt or confess it. Alicia never spoke again. Her enduring silence turned this story from a commonplace domestic tragedy into something far grander. A mystery, an enigma that gripped the headlines and captured the public imagination for months to come. Alicia remained silent. But she made one statement, a painting. It was begun when she was discharged from the hospital and placed under house arrest before the trial. According to the court-appointed psychiatric nurse, Alicia barely ate or slept. All she did was paint. Normally, Alicia labored weeks, even months before embarking on a new picture, making endless sketches, arranging and rearranging the composition, experimenting with color and form, a long gestation followed by a protracted birth as each brushstroke was painstakingly applied. Now, however, she drastically altered her creative process, completing this painting within a few days of her husband's murder. And for most people, this was enough to condemn her. Returning to the studio so soon after Gabriel's death betrayed an extraordinary insensitivity, the monstrous lack of remorse of a cold-blooded killer. Perhaps. But let us not forget that while Alicia Berenson may be a murderer, she was also an artist. It makes perfect sense, to me at least. that she should pick up her brushes and paint and express her complicated emotions on canvas. No wonder that for once painting came to her with such ease, if grief can be called easy. The painting was a self portrait. She entitled it in the bottom left hand corner of the canvas in light blue Greek lettering. One word: Alcestis. Sorry guys, got a call. Ended it. जस्ट अ सेकेंड गाइस, एक व्हाट्सएप रिप्लाई कर दूँ, बता दूँ यार घर पे कि ज़रा स्ट्रीम कर रहा हूँ यार, बाद में करता हूँ. बे भाइयों, मेरा मैं भूल गया, मैंने माइक भी लगा रखा था एकदम से, क्योंकि मेरे को विशेष दिख गया एकदम स्टार्ट में. ये कहाँ से आ गए भाई आप जाओ यहाँ से, मेरे को आपके सामने शर्म आ जाएगी. कहाँ था मैं? सॉरी गाइस, कॉल आ गया था एक. वी आर बैक. हाँ जी, ओके. एल्सेस्टिस पे थे हम. रिज्यूमिंग. एल्सेस्टिस इज द हीरोइन ऑफ अ ग्रीक मिथ, a love story of the saddest kind. Alcestis willingly sacrifices her life for her husband, Admetus? Okay. Dying in his place when no one else will. An unsettling myth of self-sacrifice. It was unclear how it related to Alicia's situation. The true meaning of allusion remained unknown to me for some time, until one day the truth came to light. But I'm going too fast. I'm getting ahead of myself. I must start at the beginning and let events speak for themselves. I mustn't color them, twist them, or tell any lies. I'll proceed step by step, slowly and cautiously. But where to begin? I should introduce myself, but perhaps not quite yet. After all, I'm not the hero of this tale. It is Alicia Berenson's story, so I must begin with her and the Alcestis. The painting is a self-portrait depicting Alicia in her studio at home in the days after the murder, standing before an easel and a canvas, holding a paintbrush. She is naked. Her body is rendered in unsparing detail, strands of long red hair falling across bony shoulders, blue veins visible beneath translucent skin, fresh scars on both her wrists. She is holding a paintbrush between her fingers. It's dripping red paint, or is it blood? She is captured in the act of painting, and yet the canvas is blank. I'm new to this. How are new people coming here? But welcome whoever is joining the stream. This is a book reading stream. हम थोड़ा सा 1-1.5 चैप्टर पढ़ चुके हैं, अभी शुरू हुई है, बहुत ज़्यादा कुछ नहीं हुआ है. And I'll continue reading forward. Her head is turned over her shoulder and she stares straight out at us, mouth open, lips parted, mute. During the trial, Jean-Felix Martin, who managed the small Soho gallery that represented Alicia, made the controversial decision, decreed by many as sensationalist and macabre, to exhibit the Alcestis. The fact the artist was currently in the dock for killing her husband meant for the first time in the gallery's long history there were queues outside the entrance. I stood in line with other prurient art lovers waiting my turn by the neon red lights of a sex shop next door. One by one we shuffled inside. Once in the gallery, we were headed towards the painting like an excitable crowd at a fairground making its way through a haunted house. Eventually, I found myself at the front of the line and was confronted with the Alcestis. Alcestis उसकी पेंटिंग का नाम था. मैं एक बहुत चेतन भगत भी पढ़ना गई. मैंने सोचा था एक्चुअली चेतन भगत पढ़ने की. इससे पहले जो हमने किताब पढ़ी थी, दैट वाज अनुभव अग्रवाल की 2 किताबें पढ़ी थी हमने पिछले साल. उसके बाद मुझे क्लोजेस्ट यही लग रहा था कि चेतन भगत ही क्लोजेस्ट है, बट अब हम एक मर्डर मिस्ट्री काइंड ऑफ अ बुक ले आए हैं एंड ये पढ़ रखी है मेरे कुछ दोस्तों ने, जिन्होंने मेरे को रिकमेंड किया कि अच्छी है भाई, पढ़ना चाहिए, अच्छे ट्विस्ट है इसमें और थोड़ा माइंड फक है एंड में. मैंने कहा लेट्स गो भाई, फिर पढ़ते हैं. अभी तक इस कहानी में ही हुआ है, हल्का सा अगर मैं रिकैप दे दूँ आपको, कि हमें पता चलता है अलीशिया बेरेंसन 33 साल की थी जब उसने अपने पति का मर्डर कर दिया. उसके पति के मर्डर को करीब 6 साल बीत चुके हैं और जब पुलिस ने डिस्कवर किया था, वो दोनों आर्टिस्ट थे बाय द वे, दोनों के दोनों. हर हस्बैंड वाज अ फैशन फोटोग्राफर एंड अलीशिया बेरेंसन वाज अ पेंटर. जो हमें ये डिक्टेट कर रहा है कहानी, अभी तक हमें उसके बारे में कुछ पता नहीं है, बट वो ये कहता है कि यार उसके ओपिनियन में अलीशिया बेरेंसन वाज अ गुड पेंटर, बट वो तो समय ही बता पाएगा कि कितना वो स्टैंड कर पाएगी. बट उसको जो बंदा था उसकी फ़ोटोग्राफ्स कुछ ज़्यादा अच्छी नहीं लगती थी. वो कुछ लड़कियों की अब्रप्ट सी वियर्ड पोजीशंस में नेकेड तस्वीरें लेता था. दैट वाज हिज आर्ट अपेरेंटली एंड ही डिड नॉट रियली लाइक इट. इट वाज वेरी चीप फॉर हिम इन अदर वर्ड्स. तो आगे बढ़ते हैं हम और हमें पता चलता है कि अच्छा, जब उसकी मौत हुई थी उसके पति की, जब पुलिस आई थी उसके घर, तो दे डिस्कवर्ड कि उसका पति तो मरा पड़ा है साइड में और वो खड़ी हुई थी फायर प्लेस के साइड में एकदम फ्रोजन लाइक अ स्टैचू एंड देयर वाज टू मच ब्लड. मतलब हाँ, एक आदमी मरा था बट देयर वाज टू मच ब्लड फॉर वन पर्सन. दे वेंट एंड चेक्ड अलीशिया, तो एक चाकू दिखा उन्हें और चाकू पे खून लगा हुआ था एंड दे सॉ देयर वर कट मार्क्स ऑन हर रिस्ट एंड व्हेन दे ट्राइड टू सेव हर शी रेजिस्टेड अ लॉट. So apparently she did not want to be saved. जब उसे पकड़ के भी ले गए, उसने कुछ नहीं बोला. उससे बहुत पूछताछ करी पुलिस ने, उसने कुछ नहीं बोला. उससे इंटरव्यूज़ वगैरह हुआ, उसने कुछ नहीं बोला. जब उस पे अपने पति के मर्डर का इल्ज़ाम लगा दिया गया, उसने तब भी कुछ नहीं बोला. अपने मुंह से कुछ नहीं बोला. उसने बस बहुत सारी पेंटिंग्स बनानी शुरू कर दी. एक जो पेंटिंग बनाई थी उसने, उसका नाम था एल्सेस्टिस. दैट वॉज अ सेल्फ पोर्ट्रेट विच वी जस्ट 1 मिनट पहले जो हम पोर्ट्रेट डिस्क्राइब कर रहे थे, इन विच शी स्टैंडिंग विद मार्क्स ऑन अ रिस्ट एंड पेंट ब्रश से लाल रंग टपक रहा है. अब वो लाल रंग है या खून डिपिक्ट कर रहा है, वी डोंट नो, बट द कैनवस इज ब्लैंक. दैट वॉज द एल्सेस्टिस जिसका अब एग्जीबिशन लगा है. अलीशिया बेरेंसन इज अरेस्टेड एंड उसका काम बाहर है, तो पीपल आर देयर टू सी इट. I stood in line with the other prurient art lovers, waiting my turn by the neon red lights of a sex shop next door. One by one we shuffled inside. Once in the gallery, we headed towards the painting like an excitable crowd at the fairground making its way through a haunted house. Eventually, I found myself at the front of the line and was confronted with the Alcestis. I stared at the painting, staring into Alicia's face, trying to interpret the look in her eyes, trying to understand, but the portrait defied me. Alicia stared back at me, a blank mask, unreadable, impenetrable. I could divine neither innocence nor guilt in her expression. मतलब अलीशिया थी नहीं वहाँ पे, पेंटिंग में जो उसका पोर्ट्रेट था, दैट स्टेयर्ड बैक एट हिम. Other people found her easier to read. Pure evil, whispered the woman behind me. Isn't she? Her companion agreed. Cold-blooded bitch. A little unfair, I thought, considering Alicia's guilt had yet to be proven. But in truth, it was a foregone conclusion. The tabloids Goosebumps aa gaye mere ko. The tabloids had cast her as a villain from the start, a femme fatale, a black widow, a monster. The facts, such as they were simple. Alicia was found alone with Gabriel's body, only her fingerprints were on the gun. There was never any doubt she killed Gabriel. Why she killed him, on the other hand, remained a mystery. The murder was debated in the media, and different theories were espoused in print and radio on the morning chat shows. Experts were brought in to explain, condemn, justify Alicia's actions. She must have been a victim of domestic abuse, surely pushed too far before finally exploding. Another theory involved a sex game gone wrong. The husband was found tied up, wasn't he? Some suspected it was an old-fashioned jealousy that drove Alicia to murder. Another woman, probably. But at the trial, Gabriel was described by his brother as a devoted husband, deeply in love with his wife. Well, what about money? Alicia didn't stand to gain much by his death. She was the one who had money, inherited from her father. And so it went on. Endless speculations, no answers, only more questions. About Alicia's motives and her subsequent silence. Why did she refuse to speak? What did it mean? Was she hiding something? Protecting someone? If so, who? And why? At the time, I remember thinking that while everyone was talking, writing, arguing about Alicia, at the heart of this frantic, noisy activity, there was a void. A silence. A sphinx. During the trial, the judge took a dim view of Alicia's persistent refusal to speak. Innocent people, Mr. Justice Alverstone pointed out, tended to proclaim their innocence loudly. And often, Alicia not only remained silent, but she showed no visible sign of remorse. She didn't cry once throughout the trial, a fact made much of in the press, her face remaining unmoved, cold, frozen. The defense had little choice but to enter a plea of diminished responsibility. Alicia had a long history of mental health problems, it was claimed, dating back to her childhood. The judge dismissed a lot of it as hearsay, but in the end he allowed himself to be swayed by Professor Lazarus Diomedes, Professor of Forensic Psychiatry at Imperial College London and Clinical Director of the Grove, a secure forensic unit in the North London. Professor Diomedes argued that Alicia's refusal to speak was in itself evidence of profound psychological distress and she should be sentenced accordingly. This was a rather roundabout way of saying something that psychiatrists don't like putting bluntly. Diomedes was saying Alicia was mad. It was the only explanation that made any sense. Why else the man you loved to a chair? Why else tie the man you loved to a chair and shoot him in the face at close range and then express no remorse, give no explanation, not even speak? She must be mad. She had to be. In the end, Justice Alverstone accepted the plea of diminished responsibility and advised the jury to follow suit. Alicia was subsequently admitted to the Grove, under the supervision of the same Professor Diomedes whose testimony had been so influential on the judge. The truth is, if Alicia weren't mad, this is, if her silence was merely an act, a performance for the benefit of the jury, then it had worked. She was spared a lengthy prison sentence, and if she proceeded to make a full recovery, she might well be discharged in a few years. Surely now is the time to begin faking that recovery, to utter a few words here and there, then a few more, to slowly communicate some kind of remorse, but no. Week followed week, month followed month, and the years passed, and still Alicia didn't speak. There was simply silence, and so, with no further revelation forthcoming, the disappointed media eventually lost interest in Alicia Berenson. She joined the ranks of other briefly famous murderers, faces we remember but whose names we forget. Not all of us, it must be said, some people, myself included, continued to be fascinated by the myth of Alicia Berenson and her enduring silence. As a psychotherapist, it was obvious to me that she had suffered a severe trauma surrounding Gabriel's death, and this silence was a manifestation of that trauma. Unable to come to terms with what she had done, Alicia stuttered and came to a halt like a broken car. I wanted to help start her up again, help Alicia tell her story, to heal and get well. I wanted to fix her. Without wishing to sound boastful, I felt uniquely qualified to help Alicia Berenson. I'm a forensic psychotherapist and used to working with some of the most damaged, vulnerable members of the society. And something about Alicia's story resonated with me personally. I felt a profound empathy with her right from the start. Unfortunately, I was still working on Broadmoor in those days. And so, treating Alicia should have remained an ideal fantasy and not fate unexpectedly intervened. दोबारा पढ़ता हूँ, ये मैंने गलत थोड़ा ऊपर नीचे पढ़ दिया. Okay. Unfortunately, I was still working at Broadmoor in those days, and so treating Alicia should have remained an ideal fantasy had not fate unexpectedly intervened. Nearly 6 years after Alicia was admitted, the position of forensic psychotherapist became available at the Grove. As soon as I saw the advert, I knew I had no choice. I followed my gut and applied for the job. And यहाँ पे ख़त्म होता है दूसरा चैप्टर. आज हम कितने चैप्टर्स पढ़ने वाले हैं? Let me see. The imagery is very very good. Indeed it is, भाई. Goosebumps, goddamn, वो, yeah. है ना? It's good. It's a nicely written book. We have about 30 chapters, I guess, somewhat about 30 chapters. 3, 2, okay, what is 3, 2, ये क्या है? 1 addition, part 5. Okay, parts में divided है ये already. Part 2 कहाँ पे आता है? Let me check. Let's do 5 chapters please. हाँ, we will do. मतलब मैं part 1 करना चाह रहा हूँ ख़त्म. part 1 में देख रहा हूँ कहाँ तक जाता है. part 1 तो शायद 10 chapters तक जाता है यार. 2 हफ्ते लगेंगे क्या ये किताब ख़त्म करने में अगर ऐसे करेंगे तो. कितनी देर हो गई है मैं स्ट्रीम करते हुए? अभी तो 40 मिनट ही हुए हैं. लेट्स गो. 3rd चैप्टर से शुरू करते हैं. तो देखते हैं अगर हम टाइम से थोड़ा हमने 5 पार्ट ख़त्म कर लिए तो हम 10 पार्ट भी कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि रोज़ 10 पार्ट करेंगे तो ख़त्म हो जाएगी इस हफ्ते. 5 वो है ना, पार्ट्स नहीं, एक्चुअली चैप्टर्स, 10 चैप्टर्स बोलना चाह रहा हूँ मैं, क्योंकि 5 पार्ट्स में डिवाइडेड है बुक. तो या सो कोजी हियर. थैंक्स मैन. भाई मेरे ये स्टूडियो ख़राब हो गया. मेरे को बहुत देर से दिख रहा है कि कोई भी नहीं देख रहा, पर मैं कमेंट्स देख पा रहा हूँ, तो आई एम श्योर पीपल आर देयर. बट अगेन लेट्स गो. Chapter 3. Okay, we have an introduction of who is narrating. Chapter 3. My name is Theo Faber. I'm 42 years old and I became a psychotherapist because I was fucked up. That's the truth. Though it's not what I said during the job interview when the question was put to me. What drew you to psychotherapy, do you think? Asked Indira Sharma. Wow, Indira Sharma. Indians har jagah pahunch jate hain. Peering at me over the rim of her owlish glasses. Indira was consultant psychotherapist at the Grove. She was in her late 50s with a round, attractive face, the long, jet black hair streaked with grey. She gave me a small smile as if to reassure me this was an easy question, a warm-up volley, a precursor to a trickier shots to follow. I hesitated. I could feel the other members of the panel looking at me. I remained conscious of maintaining eye contact as I trotted out a rehearsed response. A sympathetic tale about working part-time in a care home as a teenager and how this inspired an interest in me in psychology, which in turn led to postgraduate study of the psychotherapy and so on. I wanted to help people, I suppose, I said with a shrug. That's it really, which was bullshit. I mean, of course, I wanted to help people, but that was a secondary aim. Particularly at the time I started training, the real motivation was purely selfish. I was on a quest to help myself. I believe the same is true for most people who go into mental health. We are drawn to this particular profession because we are damaged. Wow. We study psychology to heal ourselves. Whether we are prepared to admit this or not is another question. As human beings, our earliest years reside in a land before memory. We like to think of ourselves as emerging from this primordial fog with our characters fully formed, like Aphrodite rising perfect from the sea foam. But thanks to increasing research into the development of the brain, we know this is not the case. We are born with the brain half formed, more like a muddy lamp of clay than a divine Olympian. As the psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott put it, there is no such thing as a baby. The development of our personalities doesn't take place in isolation but in relationship with another. We are shaped and completed by unseen, unremembered forces, namely our parents. This is frightening for obvious reasons. Who knows what indignities were suffered, what torments and abuses in this land before memory? Our character was formed without us even knowing it. In my case, I grew up feeling edgy, afraid, anxious. This anxiety seemed to predate my existence and exist independently of me, but I suspect it originated in my relationship with my father, around whom I was never safe. कितना सुंदर लिखा हुआ है भाई, वाओ। मेरे को थोड़ी लाइट ज़्यादा मेरे आंखों में लग रही है, मेरे को वो हो रहा है। लेट मी जस्ट रिड्यूस इट अ लिटिल बिट। तो बढ़ गई। इज इट ओके? आई थिंक दिस इज अ लिटिल बेटर। थोड़ी मेरे मुंह पे ज़्यादा पड़ रही थी लाइट। My father's unpredictable and arbitrary rages made any situation, no matter how benign, into a potential minefield. An innocuous remark or a dissenting voice would trigger his anger and set off a series of explosions from which there was no refuge. The house shook as he shouted, chasing me upstairs into my room. I'd lived under the bed and slid under it, against the wall. I'd breathe in my feathery air, praying the bricks would swallow me up and I would disappear, but his hand would grab the hold of me, drag me out to meet my fate. The belt would be pulled off and the whistle in the air before it struck. Each successive blow knocking me sideways, burning my flesh. Then the whipping would be over, as abruptly as it had begun. I'd be tossed to the floor, landing in the crumpled heap. A rag doll discarded by an angry toddler. I was never sure what I had done to trigger this anger or if I even deserved it. I asked my mother why my father was always so angry with me, and how she would give a despairing shrug and say, "How should I know? Your father's completely mad." When she said he was mad, she wasn't joking. Were he to be assessed by a psychiatrist today, I suspect my father would be diagnosed with a personality disorder. An illness. हो गया बिल्कुल ही। हाँ. If my father was to be diagnosed today, कहाँ गया? हाँ. I suspect my father would be diagnosed with a personality disorder, an illness which went untreated for the duration of his life. The result was a childhood and adolescence dominated by hysteria and physical violence, threats, tears, and breaking glass. There were moments of happiness, of course, usually when my father was away from home. I remember one winter where he was in America on a business trip for a month. For 30 days, my mother and I had free reign of the house and garden without his watchful eye. It snowed heavily in London that December, and whole of our garden was buried beneath a thick, crisp white carpet. Mum and I made a snowman. Unconsciously or not, we built him to represent our absent master. I christened him Dad, and with his big belly, 2 black stones for eyes, two slanting twigs for stern eyebrows, there was indeed an uncanny resemblance. We completed the illusion by giving him my father's gloves, hat, and umbrella. And then we proceeded to pelt him violently with snowballs, giggling like naughty children. अभी हम उस साइकोथेरेपिस्ट की कहानी सुन रहे हैं, उसका बचपन सुन रहे हैं, जो ये किताब लिख रहा है अपने पर्सपेक्टिव से, जिसका नाम है थियो फेबर. ही इज़ अ 42-year-old मैन, साइकोथेरेपिस्ट, जिसने अभी अभी वो वाला मेंटल असाइलम में फाइमे से द ग्रोव ज्वाइन किया है, जहाँ पे मेंटल असाइलम नहीं कहेंगे शायद उसे, जहाँ पे मेंटली इल क्रिमिनल्स को रखा जाता है. द ग्रोव जगह का नाम है. उसने अभी अभी वो ज्वाइन किया एज अ साइकोथेरेपिस्ट, और वो अपने बचपन के बारे में बता रहा है हमें कि मैं इसलिए बना, मैंने ये सब इसलिए पढ़ाई करी और मैं इसलिए बना क्योंकि आई वॉन्टेड टू ट्रीट माई सेल्फ. आई वॉज हर्ट, आई वॉज फक्ड अप. क्यों? क्योंकि उसका बाप उसे बचपन में मारता था एंड वॉज अ वेरी ट्रोमैटिक चाइल्डहुड. तो एक ऐसी कहानी बता रहा है कि एक बार नहीं था मेरा बाप शहर में क्रिसमस के टाइम के अराउंड लंदन में, और बहुत स्नो पड़ी हुई थी, और हमने एक स्नोमैन बनाया और पापा जैसे उसे बनाया और उसको पापा के ग्लव्स वगैरह पहनाए, और वो लग भी रहा था उसके बाप जैसा. एंड फिर उन्होंने उस पे स्नोबॉल्स मारी उसके और उसकी माँ ने, क्योंकि वो ऑब्वियसली पसंद नहीं करते थे उन्हें. ये इतना क्यों है? weirdly wholesome. There was a heavy snowstorm that night. My mother went to bed and I pretended to sleep. Then I snuck out to the garden and stood under the falling snow. I held my hands outstretched, catching snowflakes, watching them vanish on my fingertips. I felt joyous and frustrating at the same time, and spoke to some truth I couldn't express myself. My vocabulary was too limited, my words too loose, a net in which to catch it. Somehow, grasping at vanishing snowflakes is like grasping at happiness, an act of possession which instantly gives way to nothing. It reminded me that there was a world outside this house, a world of vastness and unimaginable beauty, a world that for now remained out of my reach. That memory has returned repeatedly to me over the years. It's as if the misery that surrounded it made that brief moment of freedom burn even brighter, a tiny light surrounded by darkness. My only hope of survival, I realized, was to retreat, physically as well as psychically. I had to get away, far away, only then I would be safe. And eventually at 18 I got the grades I needed to secure a place in the university. I left that semi-detached prison in Surrey and I thought I was free. I was wrong. I didn't know it then, but it was too late. I had internalized my father, introjected him, buried him deep in my unconsciousness. No matter how far I ran, I carried him with me. Wherever I went, I was pursued by an infernal, relentless chorus of furies, all with his voice, shrieking that I was worthless, shameful, a failure. During my first term at university, that first cold winter, the voices got so bad, so paralyzing, they controlled me. Immobilized by fear, I was unable to go out, socialize, or make any friends. I might as well have never left home. It was hopeless. I was defeated, trapped, backed into a corner, no way out. Only one solution presented itself. I went from chemist to chemist, buying packets of paracetamol. I bought only a few packets at a time to avoid arousing suspicion, but I needn't have worried. No one paid me the least attention. I was clearly as invisible as I felt. It was cold in my room and my fingers were numb and clumsy as I tore open the packets. It took an immense effort to swallow all the tablets, but I forced them all down, pill after bitter pill. Then I crawled into my uncomfortable, narrow bed. I shut my eyes and waited for death. But death didn't come. Instead, a searing, gut wrenching pain tore through my insides. I doubled up and vomited, throwing up bile and a half digested pills all over myself. I lay in the dark, a fire burning in my stomach, but for what seemed like eternity. And then, slowly, in the darkness, I realized something. I didn't want to die. Not yet. Not when I hadn't lived. And this gave me a kind of a hope, however murky and ill-defined. It propelled me at any rate to acknowledge that I couldn't do this alone. I needed help. I found it in the form of Ruth. A psychotherapist referred to me through the university counseling service. Ruth was white-haired and plump, and there was something grandmotherly about her. She had a sympathetic smile, a smile I wanted to believe in. She didn't say much at first. She just listened while I talked. I talked about my childhood, my home, my parents, and as I talked, I found out that no matter how distressing the details I related, I could feel nothing. I was disconnected from my emotions, like a hand severed from a wrist. I talked about painful memories and suicidal impulses but couldn't feel them. I would, however, occasionally look up at Ruth's face. And to my surprise, tears would be collecting in her eyes as she listened. This may seem hard to grasp, but those tears were not hers, they were mine. At the time, I didn't understand, but that's how therapy works. A patient delegates his unacceptable feelings to his therapist, and she holds everything he's afraid to feel and she feels it for him. And there, ever so slowly, she feeds his feelings back to him, as Ruth fed mine back to me. We continued seeing each other for several years, Ruth and I. She remained the one constant in my life. Through her, I internalized a new kind of a relationship with another human. One based on mutual respect, honesty, and kindness. Not recriminating anger and violence, I slowly started to feel differently inside about myself. Less empty, more capable of feeling less afraid. The hateful internal chorus never entirely left me, but I now had Ruth's voice to counter it, and I paid less attention. As a result, the voices in my head grew quieter and would temporarily vanish. I'd feel peaceful, even happy sometimes. It was obvious that psychotherapy had quite literally saved my life, and more importantly, it had transformed the quality of that life. And talking cure was central to who I became. The talking cure was central to who I became. In a very profound sense, it defined me. It was, I knew, my vocation. After university, I trained as a psychotherapist in London. Through my training, I continued seeing Ruth. She remained supportive and encouraging, although she warned me to be realistic about the path I was undertaking. "It's no walk in the park," was how she put it. She was right. Working with patients, getting my hands dirty, well, it proved far from comfortable. I remember my first visit to a secure psychiatric unit. Within a few minutes of my arrival, a patient had pulled down his pants, squatted, and defecated in front of me. A stinking pile of shit. And subsequent incidents, less stomach churning but just as dramatic, messy, botched suicide attempts at self-harm, uncontained hysteria and grief, all felt more than I could bear. But each time somehow I drew on hitherto untapped resilience. But hitherto क्या होता है यार? ये बीच बीच में बहुत सारे ऐसे वर्ड्स आए जो मुझे लगा ये क्या होता है, बट ये hitherto कुछ ज़्यादा ही मेरे को ऐसा इंट्रीग कर दिया इस वर्ड ने कि इस वर्ड का मतलब क्या होता है. रुको एक सेकंड, मैं एक बार गूगल करना चाहूँगा. hitherto मीनिंग क्या प्रोनाउंसिएशन होती है इसकी?
Hitherto.
hitherto
Hitherto.
okay, until now, okay. Okay, but each time somehow I drew on hitherto untaped resilience. Bro, this is too much English, man. Damn. It's odd how quickly one adapts to strange new world of a psychiatric unit. You become increasingly comfortable with madness, and not just the madness of others, but your own. We're all crazy, I believe, just in different ways. I agree. I agree. Which is why and how I related to Alicia Berenson. I was one of the lucky ones. Thanks to a successful therapeutic intervention at a young age, I was able to pull back from the brink of psychic darkness. In my mind, however, the other narrative remained forever a possibility. I might have gone crazy and ended up my days locked in an institution like Alicia. There, but for the grace of God. Of course, I couldn't say any of this to Indira Sharma when she asked why I became a psychotherapist. Indira Sharma was the interviewer, you remember? It was an interview panel after all, and if nothing else, I knew how to play the game. In the end, I said, I believe the training makes you into a psychotherapist, regardless of your initial intentions. Indira nodded sagely. Yes, quite right, very true, she said. The interview went well. My experience of working at Broadway Moor gave me an edge. Indira said, demonstrating I could cope with extreme psychological distress, I was offered the job on the spot and I accepted. 1 month later, I was on my way to the Grove. तो थर्ड चैप्टर में हमें इस थेरेपिस्ट की कहानी पता चलती है और ये अपने बारे में बताता है कि कैसे इसका बचपन इसके बाप की वजह से बहुत ही ज़्यादा ऊपर नीचे सा रहा हो, इसे बहुत मारता था और पकड़ पकड़ के मारता था और इसे ऐसा लगता था भाई बस मैं कहीं छुप जाऊं, वो बेड के नीचे छुप जाता था और वो दीवार को देखते उसे लगता भाई बस मैं इस दीवार में समा जाऊंगी, मुझे निकल जाए, बट वो निकाल के बेल्टों से मारते थे उसे. ऐसा नहीं है कि पूरे टाइम उदास ही रहता था, कुछ कुछ बीच में खुशी के पल होते थे जब वो उसके पापा उससे दूर चले जाता था. और ऐसा एक उसने डिस्क्राइब किया हुआ इंसिडेंट जब उसका बाप शहर में नहीं था और वो और उसकी माँ दोनों ने एक स्नोमैन बनाया उसके बाप की तरह और उस स्नोमैन पे बहुत सारी स्नोबॉल मारी और खुश होते रहे बच्चों की तरह. वो अपनी माँ से बोलता था मतलब कि भाई, और उसकी माँ का ये जवाब होता था कि भाई मैं क्या करूँ, ये आदमी पागल है. वही कहता है कि हाँ यार पागल तो था शायद वो आदमी, कि अगर आज की डेट में उसका कोई साइकियाट्रिक इवैल्यूएशन होता है उसके बाप का, तो शायद वो कहता है, राइटर कहता है कि शायद उसे कुछ पर्सनैलिटी डिसऑर्डर निकल के ज़रूर आता. एनीवेज वो आगे बताता है कि कैसे वो जब 18 साल का हुआ उसे लगा भाई मेरे को अब निकलना है यहाँ से, और वो एक अच्छे कॉलेज में गया और पढ़ाई वढ़ाई शुरू करी, पर वो अपने बाप को पीछे नहीं छोड़ पाया. एंड उसने थेरेपी लेनी शुरू करी कॉलेज में, जिससे उसे लगता है कि बहुत हेल्प हुई उसकी, और वो अलीशिया बेरेंसन की तरह नहीं बन गया. वरना उसे लगता है वो एक थॉट रह गया बस कि भाई क्या पता मैं अंदर से इतना डैमेज हो चुका था, अगर मेरे को वो थेरेपी उस टाइम ना मिलती और वो थेरेपिस्ट ना मिलती और मैं वो सेशंस ना लेता तो मैं भी अलीशिया बेरेंसन की तरह ऐसे ही कहीं लॉकडाउन पड़ा हुआ होता, दिमाग ख़राब हो जाता मेरा भी तो. बट हाँ, फिर वो आगे बताता है कि भाई ये सब रीजंस थे मेरे बनने के साइकोथेरेपिस्ट और मैं बना, और आसान नहीं था, और थोड़ा बहुत उसने बताया कि क्या क्या हुआ. बट ये सब वो अपने इंटरव्यू में थोड़ी बोल सकता था, जो कि वो भी इस वक्त इंटरव्यू दे रहा था द ग्रोव के लिए. द ग्रोव जहाँ एलिशिया बेरेंसन बंद थी, एलिशिया बेरेंसन की वजह से वो वहाँ जा रहा था. एंड उसका इंटरव्यू क्लियर हो जाता है और 1 महीने बाद ही वॉज ऑन द वे टू द ग्रोव. यहाँ से हम बढ़ते हैं चैप्टर 4 की तरफ. कम से कम 5 चैप्टर्स तो आज हम रीड करेंगे. Chapter 4. I arrived at the grove pursued by an icy January wind. The bare trees stood like skeletons along the road. The sky was white, heavy with snow that had yet to fall. I stood outside the entrance and reached for my cigarettes in my pocket. I hadn't smoked in over a week. I'd promised myself that this time I meant it. I'd quit for good. Yet, here I was already giving in. I lit one, feeling annoyed with myself. Psychotherapists tend to view smoking as an unresolved addiction, one that decent therapists should have worked through and overcome. I didn't want to walk in reeking of cigarettes, so I popped a couple of mints into my mouth and chewed them while I smoked, hopping from foot to foot. I was shivering. But if I'm honest, it was more with the nerves than cold. I was having doubts. My consultant at Broadmoor had made no bones about saying I was making a mistake. He hinted a promising career was being cut short by my departure, and he was sniffy about the Grove, the professor, Diomedes in particular. An unorthodox man does a lot of work with group relations, worked with Pooks for a while, ran some kind of alternative therapeutic community in the 80s in Hertfordshire, not economic viable. Those models of therapy, especially today. He hesitated a second, then went on in a lower voice. I'm not trying to scare you, Theo, but I've heard rumblings about that place getting axed. You could find yourself out of a job in 6 months. Are you sure you won't reconsider? I hesitated, but only out of politeness. Quite sure, I said. He shook his hand. Seems like a career suicide to me, but if you made your decision... I didn't tell him about Alicia Berenson, about my desire to treat her. I could have put it in terms he might understand, that working with her might lead to a book or a publication of some kind, but I knew there was little point. He'd still say I was making a mistake. Perhaps he was right. I was about to find out. I stubbed out my cigarette, banished my nerves, and went inside. The Grove was located in the oldest part of Edgware Hospital. The original red brick Victorian building had long since been surrounded by dwarfed by larger and generally uglier additions and extensions. The Grove lay in the heart of this complex. The only hint of its dangerous occupants was a line of security cameras perched on the fences like watching birds of prey. In the reception, every effort had been made to make it appear friendly. Large blue couches, crude, childish artworks by the patients taped to the walls. It looked to me more like a kindergarten than a secure psychiatric unit. A tall man appeared at my side. He grinned at me and held out his hand. We are going to read, I think, about 15-20 minutes more. हम ये चीज़ पढ़ेंगे, शायद 20 मिनट 25 मिनट और पढ़ेंगे, 20 मिनट और पढ़ेंगे. 4th चैप्टर अभी हमने शुरू करा है और हम 5th चैप्टर ख़त्म करके ही आज जाने का प्लान करते हैं. Thank you very much, bye. A tall man appeared by my side. A tall man appeared at my side. He grinned at me and held out his hand. He introduced himself as Yuri, head psychiatric nurse. Welcome to the Grove, Yuri said. Not much of a welcoming committee, I'm afraid. Just me. Yuri was a good-looking, well-built, and in his late 30s. He had dark hair and a tribal tattoo creeping up his neck, above his collar. He smelled of tobacco and too much sweet aftershave. Although he spoke with an accent, his English was perfect. I moved here from Lithuania 7 years ago, he said. I didn't speak a word of English when I arrived, but in a year I was fluent. That's very impressive. Not really. English is an easy language. You should try Latvian. Latvian? मैंने कभी नहीं सुना लटवानिया के बारे में. Interesting. He laughed and reached for the jangling chain of keys around his belt. He pulled off a set and handed it to me. You'll need these for the individual rooms, and there are codes you need to know for the wards. That's a lot. I had fewer keys at Broadmoor. Yeah, well, we stepped up security quite a bit recently since Stephanie joined us. Who's Stephanie? Yuri didn't reply, but nodded at the woman emerging from the office behind the reception desk. She was Caribbean in her mid-40s with sharp, angular bob. Oh, बालों की बात हो रही है ना? I'm Stephanie Clark, she said, manager of the Grove. Stephanie gave me an unconvincing smile. As I shook her head, I noticed her grip was firmer and tighter than Yuri's and rather less welcoming. As manager of this unit, she said, safety is my top priority. Both the safety of the patients and of the staff. If you aren't safe, then neither are your patients. She proceeded to hand me a small device, a personal attack alarm. Carry this with you at all times. Don't just leave it in your office. I resisted the inclination to say, yes, ma'am. Better keep on the right side of her if I wanted an easy life. That had been my tactic with previous bossy ward managers. Avoid confrontation and keep under the radar. Good to meet you, Stephanie, I said, smiling. Stephanie nodded but didn't smile back. Yuri will show you to your office. She turned and marched off without a second glance. Follow me, Yuri said. I went with him to the ward entrance, a large reinforced steel door. Next to it, a metal detector was manned by a security guard. I'm sure you know the drill, Yuri said. No sharp objects, nothing that could be used as a weapon. No lighters, added the security guard as he frisked me, fishing my lighter from my pocket with an accusing look. Sorry, I said. I forgot I had it. Yuri beckoned me to follow him. I'll show you to your office, he said. Everyone's in the community meeting, so it's pretty quiet. Can I join them? In community? Yuri looked surprised. You don't want to settle in first? I can settle in later if it's all the same to you. He shrugged. Whatever you want, this way. He led me down interconnecting corridors punctuated by locked doors. A rhythm of slams and bolts and keys turning in locks. We made slow progress. It was obvious not much had been spent on the upkeep of the building in several years. Paint was crawling away from the walls and a faint musty smell of mildew and decay permeated the corridors. Yuri stopped outside a closed door and nodded. There and there, he said. Go ahead. Okay, thanks. I hesitated, preparing myself. Then I opened the door and went inside. And that was chapter 4 of part 1. जिसमें हमने देखा कि भाई जो हमारे नरेटर है, द साइकोथेरेपिस्ट, वो द ग्रोव ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं आज, जहाँ पे अलीशिया बेरेंसन है इस वक्त, जहाँ पे वो रखी हुई है, कैद करी हुई है, ट्रीट हो रही है, व्हाटएवर यू में से। वो ज्वाइन करता है और मतलब याद करता है कुछ पुरानी चीज़ें। वो याद करता है कि कैसे अभी उसके कलीग ने उसे बहुत मना किया कि भाई अपने करियर का सुसाइड कर रहा है, तो वहाँ जाके आर यू श्योर यू वांट टू गो। उसने नहीं बताया उसे कि वो अलीशिया बेरेंसन की वजह से वहाँ पे जा रहा है, क्योंकि उसे लगा मतलब वो बता सकता था जिससे शायद वो समझ जाता। उसे वो क्या बताता कि शायद वहाँ जाने से वो एक बाद में एक रिपोर्ट पब्लिश कर सके, कुछ पेपर्स पब्लिश कर सके, कोई किताब लिख सके उस पर। बट उसने नहीं बताया। उसने कहा हाँ मैं श्योर हूँ, और वो चला गया। थोड़ा नर्वस था वो अंदर जाते वक्त, बट वो अंदर गया, यूरी से मिला। यूरी वॉज द हेड नर्स, अट्टा कट्टा आदमी, लंबा चौड़ा, अच्छा देखने वाला। वो बताता है कि हाँ यार, जब से स्टेफनी ने ज्वाइन किया है तब से थोड़ी चीज़ें बदल सी गई हैं। स्टेफनी साइड से आती है एक लेडी, स्टेफनी क्लार्क, द मैनेजर ऑफ द ग्रोव। शी डिडंट स्माइल, मुस्कुराई नहीं वो उसे देख के। इसने बड़ा अच्छे से ग्रीट किया उसे कि हाय, हाथ वाथ मिलाया, गुड टू मीट यू बोला। उसने ज़्यादा रिस्पॉन्ड नहीं किया और उसे बोला कि हाँ भाई, ये आपको दिखा देंगे, यूरी विल शो इट योर ऑफिस। और बस ये बोल के चली गई वो। वेरी कोजी, 4 बार बोल चुके विशेष भाई कुछ और बोलो ताकि मेरे को लगे कि आप बॉट लगा के नहीं चले गए हो। बट थैंक यू, इट इज इंडीड। एंड वो गया अंदर, सिक्योरिटी के थ्रू जाते हुए उसके पास एक लाइटर मिला, नॉट इम्पॉर्टेंट आई थिंक, बट जाते जाते उसने कहा कि यार उसको यूरी बताता है कि यार कम्युनिटी मीटिंग चल रही है अभी, तो ये थोड़ी शांति है यहाँ पे, ज़्यादा लोग होंगे नहीं, सब कम्युनिटी मीटिंग में है। उसने वो कहा यार मैं बाद में कर लूँगा सेटल वगैरह, अगर इफ़ यू आर ओके विद इट, मैं सीधा कम्युनिटी मीटिंग में जा सकता हूँ क्या? पता नहीं उसने ऐसा क्यों बोला, शायद एक्साइटेड होगा, ईगर टू गेट टू द जॉब, मे बी नॉट। And he showed him to the door. Moving on, chapter 5. Thank you, buddy, thank you. Chapter 5. Community was held in a long room with tall barred windows that overlooked a red brick wall. The smell of coffee was in the air, mingled with traces of Yuri's aftershave. About 30 people were sitting in a circle. Most were clutching paper cups of tea or coffee, yawning and doing their best to wake up. Some, having drunk their coffees, were fidgeting with the empty cups, crumpling, flattening them, or tearing them to shreds. Community met once or twice daily. It was something between the administrative meeting and a group therapy session. Items relating to the running of the unit of the patient's care were put on the agenda to be discussed. It was Professor Diomedes was fond of saying, an attempt to involve the patient in their own treatment and encourage them to take responsibilities for their well-being. Needless to say, this attempt didn't always work. Wait, क्या लिखा हुआ है? मेरे को बिल्कुल नहीं समझ में आया. Is this English getting too complicated for me? I don't know. या फिर तुमने मेरे को इतनी तारीफ कर दी है मेरी कमेंट्स में कि मैं डिस्ट्रैक्ट हो गया हूँ. आरजे कीर. The time is 11:48 p.m. and we are reading The Silent Patient, chapter 5. Community met once or twice daily. दोबारा पढ़ रहा हूँ मैं ये वाली बात. I just want to read it again. It was something between an administrative meeting and a group therapy session. Items relating to the running of the unit or the patient's care were put on the agenda to be discussed. It was Professor Diomedes was fond of saying, an attempt to involve the patients in their own treatment and encourage them to take responsibility for their well-being. Needless to say, this attempt didn't always work. Diomedes' background in group therapy meant he had a fondness for meetings of all kinds. He encouraged as much group work as possible. You might say he was at his happiest with an audience. He had the faint air of a theatrical impresario. I thought as he rose to his feet to greet me, hands outstretched in welcome, and beckoned me over. Theo, there you are. Join us, join us. He spoke with a slight Greek accent, barely detachable. He'd mostly lost it, having lived in England for over 30 years. He was a handsome man, and although in his 60s, he looked much younger. He had a youthful, mischievous manner, more like an irreverent. He had a youthful, mischievous manner, more like an irreverent uncle than a psychiatrist. This isn't to say he wasn't devoted to the patients in his care. He arrived before the cleaners did in the morning and stayed long after the night team had taken over from the day staff, sometimes spending the night on the couch in his office. Twice divorced, Diomedes was fond of saying his third and most successful marriage was to the Grove. ये जो बहुत ज़्यादा सक्सेसफुल तरीके के लोग होते हैं, मैंने देखा है इनकी शादियाँ नहीं चलती. पता नहीं, मुझे कभी कभी ऐसा लगता है कि भाई जो ये ज़्यादा कमिटेड लोग होते हैं ना, मतलब टू देयर करियर पाथ्स, या फिर जो ज़्यादा ड्रिवन होते हैं, पता नहीं शायद वो अपने पार्टनर्स को टाइम नहीं दे पा. ये दिस इज़ अ टॉपिक फॉर अनदर डे. आई वुड जनरली लाइक टू डिस्कस अपॉन इट. बड़ा मेरे को फैसिनेटिंग सा लगता है ये कभी कभी, कि कभी कभी इट इज़ जस्ट कि दो बंदों की नहीं बन पा रही होती है, एंड अ पर्सन इज़ नॉट एबल टू सेटिस्फाई द अदर बिकॉज उसकी पूरी अटेंशन, उसका पूरा ज़िंदगी का मोटिव ही कहीं और होता है, कुछ और होता है. बट एनीवेज, कमिंग बैक टू द बुक. Sit down here, he said, gesturing to an empty chair by his side. Sit, sit, sit. I did as he asked. Diomedes presented me with a flourish. Allow me to introduce our new psychotherapist, Theo Faber. I hope you will join me in welcoming Theo to our little family. While Diomedes spoke, I glanced around the circle looking for Alicia, but couldn't see her anywhere. Apart from Professor Diomedes, impeccably dressed in suit and tie, the others were mostly in short-sleeved shirts or t-shirts. It was hard to tell who was a patient and who was a member of staff. A couple of faces were familiar to me. Christian, for instance, I had known him at Broadmoor, a rugby-playing psychiatrist with a broken nose and a dark beard. Good-looking in a bashed-up kind of a way. He left Broadmoor soon after I arrived. I didn't like Christian much, but to be fair, I hadn't known him well, as we didn't work together for long. I remembered Indra, of course, from the interview. She smiled at me and I was grateful, for hers was the only friendly face. The patients mostly glared at me with surly mistrust. I didn't blame them. The abuses they had suffered, physical, psychological, sexual, meant it would be a long time before they'd be able to trust me, if ever. The patients were all women and most had coarse features, lined, scarred. They'd had difficult lives, suffering from horrors that had driven them to retreat into the no man's land of mental illness. Their journey was etched into their faces, impossible to miss. But Alicia Berenson? Where was she? I looked around the circle again but still couldn't find her, and then I realized I was looking right at her. Alicia was sitting directly opposite to me across the circle. I had not seen her because she was invisible. Alicia was slumped forward in the chair. She was obviously highly sedated. She was holding a paper cup full of tea and her trembling hand was spilling a steady stream of it onto the floor. I restrained myself from going over and straightening her cup. She was so out of it, I doubt she'd have noticed if I had. I had not expected her to be in such bad shape. There were some echoes of the beautiful woman she had once been. Deep blue eyes, a face of perfect symmetry, but she was too thin and looked unclean. Her long red hair were hanging in a dirty tangled mess around her shoulders. Her fingernails were chewed and torn. Faded scars was visible on both her wrists, the same scars I had seen faithfully rendered in the Alcestis portrait. Her fingers did not stop trembling, doubtless a side effect of the drug cocktail she was on. Risperidone and other heavyweight antipsychotics. And glistening saliva was collecting around her open mouth, uncontrollable drooling being another unfortunate side effect of the medication. I noticed Diomedes looking at me. I pulled away my attention from Alicia and focused on him. I'm sure you can introduce yourself better than I can, Theo, he said. Won't you say a few words? Thank you, I nodded. I don't really have anything to add, just that I'm very happy to be here, excited, nervous, hopeful, and I'm looking forward getting to know everyone, particularly the patients. I was interrupted by a sudden bang at the door was thrown open. At first, I thought I was seeing things. A giant charged into the room, holding two jagged wooden spikes, which she raised high above her head and then threw at us like spears. One of the patients covered her eyes and screamed. I half expected the spears to impale us, but they landed with some force on the floor in the middle of the circle, and then I saw they weren't spears at all. It was a pool cue snapped in two. The massive patient, a dark-haired Turkish woman in her 40s, shouted, "Pisses me off. Pool cue's been broken a week and you still ain't fucking replaced it." "Watch your language, Alif," said Diomedes. "I'm not prepared to discuss the matter of the pool cue until we decide whether it's appropriate to allow you to join community at such a late juncture." He turned his head slyly and threw the question at me. "What do you think, Theo?" I blinked and took a second to find my voice. "I think it's important to respect time boundaries and arrive on time for the community." "Like you did, you mean?" said a man across the circle. I turned and saw it was Christian who had spoken. He laughed, amused by my own joke. I forced a smile and turned back to Elif. He's quite right. I was also late this morning, so maybe it's a lesson we can learn together. What you on about? Elif said. Who the fuck are you anyway? Elif, mind your language, said Diomedes. Don't make me put you on timeout. Sit down. Elif remained standing. And what about the pool cue? The question was addressed to Diomedes, and he looked at me, waiting for me to answer it. Elif, I can see you're angry about the pool cue, I said. I suspect whoever broke it was also angry. It raises the question of what do we do with anger in an institution like this? How about we stick with that and talk about anger for a moment? Would you sit down? Elif rolled her eyes, but she sat down. Indra nodded, looking pleased. We started talking about anger. Indra and I, trying to draw the patients into a discussion about their angry feelings. We worked well together. I thought I could sense Diomedes watching, evaluating my performance. He seemed satisfied. I glanced at Alicia, and to my surprise, she was looking at me, or at least in my direction. There was a dim fogginess in her expression, as if it were a struggle to focus her eyes and see. If you told me this broken shell had once been the brilliant Alicia Berenson, described by those who knew her as a dazzling, fascinating, full of life, I simply wouldn't have believed you. I knew then and there I made the right decision in coming to the Grove. All my doubts vanished. I became resolved to stop at nothing until Alicia became my patient. And there was no time to waste. Alicia was lost. She was missing, and I intended to find her. And that was the end of chapter 6 of part 1 of this book called The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. Interesting book, भाई. Interesting book. मन तो मेरा कर रहा है और पढ़ता चला जाऊं. But should we take a break over here? रहेगा. भाटी भाई, आप ये बीच बीच में आते हो और कुछ कुछ कमेंट करके चले जाते हो. एनीवेज, हमने इस चैप्टर का वो नहीं किया जो हमारे चैप्टर के बाद हिंदी रिकैप कर रहे हैं. तो भाई वो गया, वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग भाई, है ना. वो गया कम्युनिटी रूम में अंदर एंड ढूंढ रहा था बेसिकली वहाँ पे. वो बस एलिशिया बेरेंसन को ढूंढने गया था. वहाँ पे उसे दिखे, कौन दिखे, क्या नाम है मिस्टर, उनका प्रोफेसर डायोमेडीज, जिसके बारे में पहले ही बात हुई है. थोड़ी हाई हेलो हो रही थी और वो अपना इंट्रोडक्शन वगैरह ही देने लग रहा था. तब उसे दिखी एलिशिया बेरेंसन एंड हटा के उसने अपने इंट्रोडक्शन वगैरह पे वापस आया. वो तब तक एक एलिफ नाम की बहुत बड़ी सी जायंट सी लड़की लेडी अंदर आती है कमरे के और फेंक के मारती है एक स्पीयर टाइप की चीज़, जो कि पता चलता है पूल की डंडी होती है ना, वो जो पूल खेलते हैं, वो बिलियर्ड्स वाला उसकी टूटी हुई क्यों थी और उसने दे के मारी और कहा भाई ये क्या बकवास है, किसने तोड़ दी है. उसने थोड़ा बैक एंड फोर्थ डायलॉग हुआ उस जायंट लड़की और डायोमेडीज के बीच, प्रोफेसर डायोमेडीज के बीच जो इंचार्ज है वहाँ के. बट दिस इज अ पेज टर्नर, इट श्योरली इज. थोड़ा सा उनके बीच डायलॉग हुआ एंड वो बहुत ही गुस्सा थी कि भाई ये सब तो ठीक है, टाइम से नहीं आए वगैरह वाली बात बोल रहा था डायोमेडीज उसे. वो कह रहा है भाई पर मेरा पूल क्यों. और डायोमेडीज वेट करने लगा कि भाई ये नया लड़का आया है, हमारा प्रोफेसर थियो जो हमारा नरेटर है, कि आया है, देखते हैं ये कैसे हैंडल करता है सिचुएशन. उसने उसे बोला कि यार देख, जिसने तोड़ा होगा वही तो गुस्से में होगा ना, तो गुस्से का क्या करना चाहिए हमें, ऐसे एक इंस्टीट्यूशन पे आओ बात करते हैं. और वो भाई ऐसे वैसे करके आ गई, बैठी, बात करी. ये सब चल ही रहा था कि मतलब उसे लग रहा था कि भाई सही कर रहा है, वो लोग इंप्रेस हो रहे हैं उससे. प्रोफेसर थियो भी शायद इंप्रेस हो रहा था. और तभी वो देखता है कि एलिशा उसी की तरफ देख रही है, उसे ही देख रही है, उसकी तरफ देख रही है, पता नहीं. He was very eager. He is very eager to treat Alicia. क्योंकि मतलब अब जो लड़की एकदम टूटी फूटी सी एकदम ही ख़त्म पड़ी हुई है वहाँ पे, उसके बारे में उसने जो सुना था कि ये एक सुंदर फुल ऑफ लाइफ लेडी हुआ करती थी और इतनी ग्रेट आर्टिस्ट थी, वो ऐसे कैसे, मतलब ही इज़ वेरी ईगर टू ट्रीट हर, जो कि हम आगे कंटिन्यू करेंगे कल कितने बजे आएंगे स्ट्रीम पे ये तो कल ही पता चलेगा, बट हाँ वही 8 9 10 11 बजे के आसपास। एंड मैं लगाना भूल चुका हूँ आज, पता नहीं कैसे मैं भूल गया ये लगाना, बट दिस इज़ द इंस्टाग्राम। यहाँ पे आप कर सकते हैं फॉलो, और यहाँ पे आप फॉलो करेंगे तो आपको लग जाएगा पता कि हम कल कितने बजे आने वाले हैं। ये थे आज के 5 चैप्टर्स। अब मुझे बस इतना बताओ कि ये बार बार घनश्याम भाटी भाई बीच बीच में आके एक आध शब्द लिख के चले जा रहे थे जो कि मेरे को ज़्यादा समझ आ नहीं रहा था। एंड थैंक यू विशेष भाई फॉर कमिंग, थैंक यू एवरीवन। कौन कौन आज बैठा हुआ था? व्योम भाई थे, विमर्श भाई पूरे टाइम बैठे हुए थे, वेरी गुड। ऑब्सक्योर वॉज देयर, वेरी गुड। पुष्कर आया था बीच में, नाइस। बीच में भाटी आया, कह रहा बना रखा है आपने, और फिर कह रहा रहेगा। आई डोंट नो, बट एनीवेज गुड मॉर्निंग की भाई, गुड मॉर्निंग निखिल भाई। अरे क्या हो गया विमर्श, तू रो क्यों रहा है भाई? एक बुक भेजूंगा आपको, इसके बाद वो पढ़ना भाई। बिल्कुल। मैं पहले भी बता चुका हूँ कि हमने जो पिछली किताब पढ़ी थी वो इंग्लिश में थी, और मेरे को बड़ा ही मज़ा आया था भाई वो किताब पढ़ के, क्योंकि वो मतलब इंग्लिश समझ रहे हो तुम कि वो इट वॉज दिस। ये 2 किताबें हैं, दिख रही है तुम्हें? ये 2 किताबें पढ़ी थी हमने, और ये दोनों इंग्लिश में थी। इसका पार्ट 1 ये रहा, ये है इसका पार्ट 1। तो ये ऐसे लिखा हुआ है, इसका पीछे बैक साइड दिखाता हूँ, तुम समझ जाओगे। वेट अ सेकेंड, ऐसे दिख रहा है? इज इट विजिबल? रुको, हाँ ये दिख रहा है ना। अनुभव एक ऐसा शख्स जो कि प्यार की तलाश में, पढ़ पाए तुम पहली लाइन? इस तरीके से लिखा हुआ था। तो मतलब ये अगर मैं पढ़ने जाऊँ तो इस किताब में मैं कुछ भी, मेरे पास उनके हर सवाल का जवाब था, पर मैंने खामोशी भेज दी। मुझे रात भर नींद नहीं आई, मेरा मन कर रहा था कि किसी के पास जाऊं और जी भर के रो लूं, क्योंकि उनका मैसेज मुझे बहुत हर्ट कर रहा था जितनी दफ़ा पढ़ के। इट इज़ वेरी ईजी टू रीड, बट देन ऑल्सो अगेन मतलब पता नहीं, इसमें पढ़ने में ना, एक तो ये व्हाट्सएप वाली लैंग्वेज में एग्जैक्टली, एक तो ये ईजी टू रीड भी है, ऊपर से ये हिंदी में है। मतलब आप जब सुन रहे हो तो यू आर लिसनिंग इट इन हिंदी, तो आई थिंक वो थोड़ा कनेक्ट ज़्यादा कर पाती है बात। जब पता नहीं, मेरे को बस इट इज़ फॉर मी पर्सनली, मतलब मैं इतना ज़्यादा शायद इंग्लिश नरेशन के साथ ना कनेक्ट कर पाऊँ, या पता नहीं, मे बी एक फॉरेनर इंग्लिश नरेशन के साथ शायद फिर भी कनेक्ट कर जाऊँ मैं, मतलब पता नहीं। जब आई डोंट नो, तो मैंने ऐसी किताबें और ढूंढी। ये किताब थी वाई नॉट मी बाय अनुभव अग्रवाल, और इसका सेकंड पार्ट हमने पढ़ा था लास्ट ईयर। उसके बाद बीच में हमने थोड़ा ब्रेक लिया था, हम किताबें नहीं पढ़ रहे थे, गेम्स खेल रहे थे और बाकी चीज़ें कर रहे थे। बट वी गॉट मतलब बीच में एक तो और किताबें हमने पढ़ी थी, ऑस्टिन क्लियोन की एक किताब थी, शेयर योर वर्क करके, उस टाइप से ही थी, या फिर आर्टिस्ट हाउ टू स्टील लाइक एन आर्टिस्ट। हाँ ये तो है इंग्लिश में, जोन आउट हो रहा था मैं बीच में। हाँ वही थोड़ा सा मेरे को भी, मतलब यार पता नहीं, मे बी बिकॉज हमारी फर्स्ट लैंग्वेज नहीं है ना ये, इसलिए शायद, बट पता नहीं। इट वॉज द स्टोरी इज स्टिल वेरी नाइस, मतलब इट इज़ रिटन ऑल्सो वेरी ब्यूटिफुली। तो मुझे वो भी लगता है कि मतलब जैसे वो इंग्लिश में थी पर वो काफ़ी ख़राब लिखी हुई थी, बट स्टिल इट वॉज वेरी फन एटलीस्ट टू रीड इट ऑन अ स्ट्रीम लाइक दिस। तो who knows, but anyways it was a great stream. Thank you everyone for joining in, and yeah, I'll see you tomorrow probably around the same time. क्या टाइम हो गया? 12:05 हो गया। oh my god, 20 जनवरी हो गई है। 20 जनवरी को मिलते हैं दोबारा अराउंड 9 बजे रात के, 8 से 10 के बीच में। टाइम में डाल दूंगा यहाँ पे दिस। ये इंस्टाग्राम है, अगर आप बाय चांस यहाँ नहीं करते हो फॉलो तो कर लो यहाँ पे फॉलो। एंड कोई शॉर्ट्स पे भी देख रहा है क्या इस वक्त मुझे? क्योंकि मेरी 2 लाइव स्ट्रीम चल रही है और शायद वहाँ से व्यूइंग आ रही है, वॉचिंग आ रही है, पर क्या कोई जेन्युइनली उधर भी देख रहा है? आई डोंट नो। सी यू भाई, बाय बाय, बाय गाइस, आई जस्ट turn this off and yeah, see you guys tomorrow, bye bye. मुझे पता कैसे चलेगा पर ये अगर कोई वहाँ पे देख भी रहा था तो एनीवेज, जनरली गुड स्ट्रीम, 1 hour 35 minutes स्ट्रीम करी हमने आज, वाओ अमेजिंग। थैंक्स अगेन फॉर एवरीवन, थैंक्स अगेन फॉर ज्वाइनिंग एवरीवन। इसकी राइटिंग बहुत नाइस है। सी यू भाई, बाय 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 बाय।